The eerie quiet. Unknown. Under a cloudy night sky, a small being was flying high in the air. The being itself was quite inhuman, less than 11 inches high with a pair of small horns, copper-red skin, bat-like wings, and a deadly barbed tail. In addition, the creature was completely hairless, giving it the appearance of a monstrous infant. While its appearance suggested otherwise, this demonic creature had intelligence. This being, otherwise known as an imp, wasn't flying through the night for pleasure, it was performing an assignment that had been given to it a few days prior. For 3 days, the imp had been flying, stopping only to eat and rest, before continuing its scouting mission. Since it started, the imp had managed to locate 2 small villages, each of which were messaged to its master. The master would then send spies to infiltrate the settlements and investigate or capture their inhabitants for information. Yet, as the imp flew through the night, it managed to spot specks of light surrounded within a sea of trees, which indicated the signs of civilization. Much to the demi-human's pleasure, it increased the beat of its bat-like wings to approach the lights. Within the span of a minute, the imp arrived above a village that was much larger than any village it had found previously. Flying down to get a better look, the imp spotted that this village was completely surrounded by large walls with buildings that were much taller than the one-storage shacks it had seen from the other villages. Before it could continue investigating, a large runic circle of white light appeared near the lake. The imp's white eyes widened at the display of magic, one that could only be created from the highest tiers of spellcasting. The small being didn't dare draw any closer to the source of this power, as such an action would likely end with its death, which would mean that it had failed its master. Witnessing such strength in this new land needed to be reported to the master immediately, and from there, the Supreme One. With a hurried flap of its wings, the imp immediately took off and began flying back to its master. Kasha. I took a deep breath as I tried to steady my nervous mind. At this exact moment, I was finally going to use my ring, Shooting Star, to use the Wish spell, better known as Wish Upon a Star. There were only 3 uses for this ring, so if this experiment of mine failed, then I'd have lost a great resource that I doubt I could ever recover. There were 2 objectives for this experiment: the first, to see if custom wishes were possible in the new world, and second, to try and gain a complete understanding of how to cast magic. In addition, I'd spent the last 2 hours preparing for potential outcomes of this spell, but if the spell did allow for customized wording, the last half hour up until now, I'd spent going over the wording of the wish with my copy in case the spell decided to act like a monkey's paw. This also is what led to me casting the spell at an undeveloped section of Haven Lake's shoreline in the middle of the night. With most of the residents of my village asleep on the other side of the lake, there was less risk of them suffering any backlash compared to if they were near me. Another safety measure that was put into place, for both my protection as well as the protection of the village, was my copy maintaining a barrier spell around me called Deathmatch. Typically, it was used in large PvP battles since it could create isolation zones on a battlefield. A caster would determine up to 4 people be separated within the isolation zone. From there, neither the people, spells, or abilities trapped inside could break out of the zone unless the spells cast were higher than Deathmatch, the caster ran out of mana, or the caster was killed by people inside or outside the barrier. The spell used to be able to contain up to 10 players until it was nerfed to 4. Since the nerf was done before the introduction of world items, players weren't as opposed to the idea since the ganking meta was absolutely horrific. One caster player would lock 9 of their friends into the barrier with an enemy, and unless that enemy was built for combat against multiple opponents, they'd get slaughtered. Following the ganking meta was the Juggernaut meta, and the less I have to say about that shit show, the better. Regardless, I had all my preparations set. The only thing to do now is make a wish. Giving my copy a nod, which she returned, I held my left hand up and announced, "Activate Shooting Star." Following this, a large runic circle of magic, glowing with a bluish-white energy, grew to life at my feet. At the same time, I had an innate understanding that I could make whatever wish I wanted, and if I put more experience into it, the wish's effects would be even greater. I couldn't help but smile at the confirmation that Wish Upon a Star wasn't limited to predetermined options. I wished to be granted complete knowledge of tier magic, with this understanding allowing me to both learn and teach any spell from both Yggdrasil and this new world. The moment the words left my lips, my head felt like a nail was being driven into it. Each second, it felt like a hammer was driving this nail even deeper into my head. But despite the pain, information began appearing in my mind. Simple at first, from what mana was, where it came from, how to harness it, and so on. But as the time went on and I began to learn the method of casting my own spells, the pain in my head began to feel like someone was driving an ice pick into my brain. This became so great that I eventually fell to one knee while cradling my head in both hands. Even though I wanted it to stop, I sensed that this would continue regardless of what I wished. As my agony continued, my mind was force-fed knowledge at a rate that I couldn't even comprehend. There was just so much to learn, too much. In the back of my mind, I felt like the horrific pain would only get worse the higher in tier of magic that I learned. And, after enough time had passed, I couldn't tell if I was screaming or not. For only a moment, I felt like I had reached an out-of-body experience since I couldn't see, hear, or feel. Then, a voice spoke in my mind, one that I felt was the most beautiful sound that I've ever heard in my life. Stay strong. You're almost there, little one. Finally, my consciousness abandoned me and I was gripped by the sweet embrace of sleep. Up. Come on, boss, you're starting to worry me. Hearing that familiar voice, my eyes shot open to meet the concerned gaze of my copy kneeling over me. My eyes looked past her head to see that the moon was still in the sky, though it was lower in the sky than when I last saw it. Feeling the beginnings of a migraine, I nodded while massaging my temple. Not going to lie, I'm never doing something like that again. I answered to the relief of my copy, felt like my head got bashed in with a truck. Following this, I pushed myself into a sitting position. Mind telling me how long I've been clocked out and what happened when I was down to business already? Any normal person would be taking a moment to catch their breath after what seemed to be your brain almost melting. I answered with a shrug which made her roll her eyes in response. Fine, fine. You were unconscious for about a half hour. At the very least, none of the magical energy from the spell escaped from the barrier. She then gave me a concerned gaze and added, I was nervous when your eyes started glowing like light bulbs. Thought that your head was going to explode at that point until you finally passed out. Did the spell work at least? With a simple thought, I could recall basic magical theory. From it, I knew that magic came from 3 different sources. The first, which was also the most prevalent, was by drawing mana from the surrounding universe into oneself, like the way wizards did. The second, which was similar to the first, was by being granted the mana from a patron. This was where casters like priests, paladins, warlocks, and similar fit in. Finally, the rarest source was by drawing mana from one's own internal source, such as sorcerers or beings inherently connected to mana. While everyone's sources were different, every being was limited by the amount of mana that they could channel from their bodies at once. With this knowledge, I smiled to my copy, absolutely. I don't know how far this new understanding of mine goes, but I'm able to recall the basics of magic. I attempted to get onto my feet and my copy held me steady as I did. Some good news at last. Do you feel confident that you'll be able to get home or do you want to crash in the village? I'll be teleporting back to my room at the inn. I told Nina and Tyre that I would return later tonight, and I'd rather not keep the girls worried. Entertaining myself with a smirk, I added, I think I've got a few ideas on how to give Nina some homework while I'm not around. Maybe you should try and save that for tomorrow. It's probably best if you get some rest after the ordeal you went through. Returning my copy a set of rolling eyes, I teased, okay, Mom. Want me to brush my teeth before I go to bed as well? My copy flicked her finger between my eyes in reply. Don't give me ideas, smartass. See you later. With a nod, I began to cast teleport when a deluge of information entered my mind. Teleporting with magic entailed the process of moving mana from one location to another. Whenever a person performed this spell, they were bending reality so that their starting location and their ending location occupied the same area. This is what allowed for such seamless-looking transportation. I had to end my thoughts there since soon after, more explanations for different types of teleportation began appearing in my mind. I truly hoped that these bursts of knowledge would become less violent after some time had passed. On the upside, I was finally a proper archmage with all my newfound knowledge of magic. Lucrute. Day 7. Another day, another copper, at least, that's what my father used to tell me. To be honest, I never thought that the saying was something that one should live up to. There were already enough people in the world that let their lives be consumed by riches, and most of them were horrid people. For me, I found that the pride I felt and the acknowledgement I received when I accomplished a task to be an even greater reward than money, not that I was opposed to earning some coin when it was offered. It's actually what caused me to leave my village in the first place. While my father and mother were content with living the life of farmers, I was too adventurous to live such a simple life, forgotten in a town by the crossroads. When I finally left home to make a life in the city, the constant buzz of activity was something that I fell in love with. In Rantel, one might stumble into a bar fight, find their pockets picked, and see a squad of guards fist-fighting one gang or another. That could all happen in a single day. Back home in Signpass, such events might happen once a month. That mundanity was driving me insane until I finally left. Now, I couldn't imagine going back to my old life, especially when so many exciting things were occurring now. In just this week, Kasha joined our team. Another adventuring team was killed in the cemetery. We discovered that Kasha had a secret magical realm. Nina's sister was rescued, and it turned out that Nina had actually been a girl. If this was what resulted from just a few days of having Kasha in our group, then I could only imagine what a month with her would be like. With a yawn, I scratched my cheek and pulled out a copper coin from my pouch and walked over to a food stall. It was owned by a hunter named Briggs who had this astonishing ability to cook the venison he hunted in a way that I couldn't find anywhere else in the city. Flipping the copper coin to the hunter, I pointed out a salivating slice of venison that Briggs sliced off and handed over. "Thanks," I said before walking away with a satisfied grin. Tearing a chunk off the strip of meat with my teeth, I wondered about getting Kasha a surprise gift for the platinum plate rank that she'd be receiving in a few days. At the very least, I could take a look around the market to see if anything of interest caught my eye. My search, unfortunately, took a bit of time because the items and trinkets that I'd find didn't seem right for Kasha. She didn't seem to be someone who would be interested in useless objects. No, Kasha was a woman who appreciated things that could also have a practical use. It was midway through this search that I heard a voice call my name. Looking around the area, I finally spotted the voice's owner. It belonged to an elderly woman with exotic dark skin that contrasted sharply with her white hair. Her name was Jeva Nile, a merchant who hailed from the far east of the Baharuth Empire. I'd encountered Jeva a few times in the market, typically when I was looking for random odds and ends. If there's one thing she was good at, it was selling obscure items. "Good day to you, Lucrute. What brings you to the market today?" Jeva asked with a kind tone as I arrived at her stall. "I'm looking for something that I could give as a gift to a friend of mine," I answered. Jeva gave me a studious look before her mouth grew into a knowing grin. "Would this friend be a girl you fancy?" I could only chuckle and scratch the back of my head in embarrassment at how easily she could read me. "Ah, so it is a girl. Now, that is different than your typical purchases. By the by, how well has the bow I sold you been holding up?" "The bow is perfect. It's been working without any issues and the design has allowed me to fire off arrows with more force behind them. For the life of me, I haven't been able to figure out how to replicate the design without any of the test bows I made snapping," I answered excitedly. I'd only purchased this bow a few months ago, and while the design looked normal to an untrained eye, there was a warping at both ends of the bow's spine. These warpings allowed for an extra bit of power to fire the arrow. It's an ancient crafting technique used by Eastern Desert tribes. Through a mixture of water and heat, they can add a warping to the bow that won't snap the wood. Each bow takes 6 months to craft, but the craftsmanship makes up for the amount of time to create. Jeva answered, water and heat, I'd have to try that for the next bow I attempted to make. Now, young man, what kind of gift did you have in mind for this girl of yours? Jeva pried while resting her chin on her intertwined fingers. For the girl I'm thinking of, she's beautiful and refined, yet she isn't the type to desire frivolous objects. In addition, she's an adventurer, so she can take care of herself. As I said this, Jeva nodded in understanding as she reached under her stall and pulled out objects that were placed on the stall for my viewing. Some of the objects were daggers, others were jewelry. All of the objects were unique, yet my eyes eventually became drawn to a strange silver object that had hinges on it with an orange jewel in the center. What is this? I asked while poking the object. It was when I touched the object that I jumped as it quickly snapped shut to look like a cylinder. Jeva simply laughed at my reaction before she gently picked up the object and pressed the jewel, causing the small cylinder to open up once more. This is a hair binder. It's favored by dwarven women to decorate and manage their hair, especially, she then mimed a beard, causing me to nod in understanding. From what I'd heard, dwarven men and women could grow beards, guess Jeva finally confirmed it for me. Still, I recalled how Kasha began tying her hair after her first day at the guild. That little object looked nice and would be quite useful for her in binding her hair up. How much for it? I asked. Normally, I'd charge 20 silver for this, but because you've been a good customer, especially when buying some of my less sold items, I'll lower the price down to 5. Giving Jeva a friendly smile, I reached into my coin purse and pulled out the silver which I traded for the hair binder. Thanks for the help, Jeva. Kash'll love this, I said gratefully. I wish you luck with the girl. Come back again, young man. Replying with a nod, I left her stall with a bit of a pep in my step and made my way to the guild. Giving Kasha's gift a final glance, I was about to store the object away until a small figure tore it from my hands and began running. Quickly gripping my pouch in case this little asshole had a friend trying to take advantage of my momentary distraction, I began chasing after the thief. Hey, you bastard, give that back, I demanded while weaving through the morning crowd. Thankfully, my years of marksmanship had trained my eyes to spot small moving targets. The thief may have tried to lose me, but I easily kept track of the dark cloak that they wore. Every moment, I drew closer to the bastard, and more importantly, closer to my breakfast. In less than a minute, the thief broke out of the crowd, while I dogged closely behind. After a short sprint, the prick ducked into an alleyway between a pair of buildings. I began slowing down when this happened and weighed my options. Knowing these streets, I knew that this alleyway led to a dead end. A good thief would know these streets well enough to avoid such a pitfall, that is, unless this was a trap. Just my damn luck. Pulling out one of my hunting knives, I made up my mind to deal with this prick. I doubt that I'll be the last person this prick mugs, so I might as well end the cycle here. Especially because, as an adventurer, it was in my job description to slay monsters, fight bad guys, and get the girl. Stepping into the darkened passage, I noticed that the thief wasn't out in the open. Instead, there were stacks of boxes and barrels, and in addition, quite a few empty bottles. I got an idea when I spotted the bottles and quickly sheathed my knife before I unslung my bow over my shoulder and picked up a few bottles. Tossing the first bottle in the air over the nearest pile of wooden crates, I quickly pulled out one of my arrows, knocked it back, and fired it at the glass bottle, which exploded into a shower of broken glass that fell behind the crates. With no reaction, I threw the next bottle over some barrels and fired an arrow after it. This earned the reaction that I was hoping for as a surprised shout came from behind the barrels before a gangly man in dark clothing stood up. My eyes quickly darted to the knife being gripped tightly in his right hand. "The fuck are you throwing glass for?" he shouted while brushing the shards of glass off his head. "How about I answer your question with another question? What were you doing waiting behind those barrels with a knife for?" I replied while knocking another arrow to my bowstring. As I did so, I spotted a familiar figure that was still covered by a dark cloak, slip out of from behind a crate with a metallic glint from within the folds of their cloak. Making a split decision, I loosed my arrow at the cloaked figure and thanked my luck that I had acted quickly. When my arrow slammed into the right shoulder of the cloaked figure, the person was midway through throwing a knife at me. This caused their aim to falter and the knife embedded itself into a wooden barrel right next to my head. Shit! The figure screamed while clutching their shoulder. This managed to distract the man nearest to me and gave me the chance to quickly knock another arrow onto my bowstring before he could retaliate. "Osp, you alright?" The man closest me to shouted. "Do I fucking look alright, Zane?" Osp angrily barked back, "I've got a fucking arrow in me arm. That wound looks fine on my end. Then again, I could have put the arrow between your eyes." This caught both of their attentions, so I decided to continue. "I don't know who you guys are, and I really don't care. From what I can assume, your friend back there stole that object in an effort to lead me to this alley. Then, once I went past your partner, you tried to jump me and steal my belongings. Is that about right?" The man named Zane spat on the ground while muttering curses under his breath. "Fine, we admit it. We were trying to jump you. What are you gonna do now?" I gave him a shrug in reply. I didn't think that far ahead. I just wanted that hair binder back. "Though, looking at the sorry state of your friend, I'm willing to cut a deal," I said while waiting for any sudden movements from either man. One reason I was willing to cut this deal is because I had other places I needed to be right now. The other, one which I'm a little embarrassed to admit, is that I didn't have any sort of way to capture these two for the city guard to deal with. "What kinda deal?" Osp growled out as he tried to staunch the blood from his wound. "Still got the object on you?" I asked, which Osp nodded. "I want that back, and then I want the two of you gone. If I hear about any muggings in this part of the city, I'll be coming back for answers from the both of you. Understood?" With sighs, the pair nodded and Osp slowly reached into his cloak to pull out the hair binder before tossing it to me. Releasing the tension on my bowstring, I caught the binder while storing my equipment away onto my person. "This is your one warning. Try to use it wisely," I called over my shoulder while leaving the alley. After that ordeal was over, I studied the hair binder to see if it had taken any damage. While I found no damage, I decided to quickly rub it on my sleeve to remove any lingering dirt before storing it in my pouch. Hopefully, Kasha would like this gift. It took only 10 minutes for me to finally arrive at the front doors of the guild. In comparison to yesterday, there were a lot fewer people coming in and out of the building. If there was one thing I didn't enjoy, it was when there were a lot of people at the guild. I didn't hate the people, but I did hate that finding a job became more competitive when too many adventurers were at the guild. Upon entering the guild, I made my way up the stairs to reach the table where the rest of my team gathered every morning. My eyes quickly spotted Diane and Peter sitting together, but Kasha and Nina still had yet to arrive. "Morning, guys," I greeted as I took a seat at the table. "Hey, recruit. You seem in chipper spirits today. Something happen?" Peter asked while I shrugged in reply. "Just have a good feeling about today," I answered before switching the topic. "Found any jobs that we could do today?" "Not yet. It's still a bit early, so not many job requests have been submitted just yet," Dine answered. "We're going to be waiting a bit before we try again." Then, he gave a sly glance to Peter while smirking, "Unless Helena has a job stored away for you." Both Dine and I laughed at the reddening face of our team leader. Yet, our laughter was cut short as a man approached our table. One that I, and much of the guild, despised. His name was Cassius Carth, a job poacher and all-around smarmy ass. His armor looked very pristine due to how few jobs he took that were actually dangerous. "You all seem to be in high spirits. Any reason why?" Cassius asked as he took a seat between Peter and I. "We were, until you showed up," I grumbled back. Either this guy couldn't read a room or he just didn't care, since he didn't even shift position in his chair. "Why are you here, Cassius?" Peter asked in his diplomatic tone. In response, Cassius turned to Peter and grinned. I was wondering if you'd be able to tell me a bit about your teammate, Kasia Blanc. After all, we'll be working together on a mission in a few days. It'd be helpful to know a bit about who I'll be working with. Cassius answered in that smug tone of his. Really, this asshole was working the Magician's Guild protection mission as well. Not happening, Vulture. I answered immediately. This got the prick's immediate attention and caused him to momentarily scowl. That was quite rude of you to say. Then again, I shouldn't expect more from a man who only fights their battles at a distance. I was about to jump out of my chair to prove him wrong with a fist to his teeth, but a strong grip on my shoulder forced me in my chair. When I looked, I saw Dine standing above me while shaking his head. What my teammate meant to say, Peter said in my stead, was that you should really be asking Kasia these questions instead of us. She knows more about her own capabilities than we do. Cassius was silent for the moment, then he nodded and got up from the table. I see. It might be better for me to try this when Kasia is here, and tempers aren't so high. With that smug smirk of his, he left us, and Dine finally released his grip on my shoulder. I fucking hate that guy. I'm surprised that no one has punched his perfect teeth out by now. I grumbled. He might be a prick, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he's a gold plate. You can't just weasel your way to that rank without the skill to back it up, Peter stated as if I was going to challenge the guy myself. While I'd probably get a few punches in, Cassius is specialized in fighting in close range while I train to fight from a distance. I'd very likely lose that fight. After all, the number one rule of an archer is, if the opponent is close enough to hit you, then you've already lost. I get it. I answered Peter, I just don't like that the guy is asking about Kasia. I've got the feeling that he's up to something. Or is it that you're just jealous that another man might have their eyes on our teammate? Dine teased with a laugh. I glared at the large man before looking away. He was probably right about my response to Cassius, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of an answer. Come on, Dine. Take it easy on the guy. He's still new to competing for the affections of a woman against an opponent that's more well-groomed. The second Peter said this, I leaned back in my chair and said loudly, Hey, do you think that we should tell Helena that our leader, Peter, would like to take her to a private room and F? Peter's eyes widened and he held up his hands in surrender. Fine, we'll keep it quiet. This caused me to chuckle at how easily cowed he could be when Helena was brought up. Still, I count this as a win for me and a loss for Peter. If the pair of you are finished trying to outdo one another, I've got some news to tell you too. Dine interrupted, dragging both mine and Peter's attention. Another group went missing in the cemetery again. There's been talk that intelligent undead might have risen, which is why so many groups have been going missing. That was a worrying thought. Undead were already terrible to deal with due to their innate strengths and hunger for the souls of the living. The biggest reason that they weren't a larger threat was due to their lack of higher thought. From what I've heard, one undead in 1,000 that revived without the use of necromancy would retain their intelligence. Combine the immense strength of an undead along with the skills and intelligence to utilize this strength to its fullest ability, and that would be an opponent that I'd not want to fight. But the two types of intelligent undead that were extremely rare, and a death sentence to fight if one were under the gold plate rank, were liches and vampires. Liches were said to have powerful necromantic abilities that could create armies of undead in minutes. On the other hand, vampires, while unable to create armies at the rate that liches could, were known for having unparalleled strength and speed along with the ability to dominate minds and create ghouls from their victims. Even being a gold plate didn't mean that one could take these types of undead in a fight. It just meant that they'd be more likely to escape with their lives. Either way one cut it, intelligent undead became worse to fight the longer they were alive. Have there been any ideas on how to deal with a cemetery situation? Peter asked with concern. Not that I've heard of. From what I know, the Adventurers Guild is just planning to raise the required rank for cemetery missions again. At the same time, the city guard is going to treat the situation as out of sight, out of mind. Until they start to see undead bashing at the gates, or they are given specific orders to clear the cemetery themselves, they're just going to stay put. That'll hurt the lower ranks of the guild. I added, cemetery work was always the starter work for guild newbies. Dine nodded in agreement before he stroked his beard in thought. I'm expecting to see brawls for missions if this continues. Peter remarked, we probably might see an exodus of members under silver rank from Rantel to other cities in the kingdom. I couldn't help but look over the railing and down at the members skittering about on the ground floor. It would feel strange to see so few members at the guild if an exodus were to happen. It was while I was looking at the lower level of the guild that my eyes caught sight of a pair of familiar faces entering the guild. Guys, Kasia and Nina have finally arrived. This caught the attention of my teammates as they followed my gaze to where our other teammates were. Eager, aren't you? Peter teased while leaning the back of his chair. I quickly waved off his comment and thought about Nina for a moment. It felt strange to think of the little mage as a girl instead of the boy she pretended to be. Though, it did explain why her face looked more feminine than masculine. All of us just put it off as Nina being a late bloomer that was due to grow some chin hairs soon enough. Turns out that we were all wrong on that account. But, keeping that in mind, I couldn't help but notice that the loose-fitting tunic that she wore seemed a bit tight on her chest today. I think I'm going to try and forget that the observation crossed my mind. I tried to think about anything else which was actually made easy as my eyes were attracted by the movements of Kasia's bosom. Catching myself before I stared too long and ended up making a fool of myself, I pulled my eyes up to the exotic orange of Kasia's. While I've never said this aloud, it always seemed like her eyes had a slight glow to them. While one might wave such an observation off as just light reflecting from her eyes, the fact that she was a powerful sorceress added credence to my theory. From what I've seen over the years, heavy use of magic could sometimes have a physical effect on the user, especially if the user was powerful. Changes could vary, but usually there was some type of tell that I've picked up on. For instance, Nina's eyes would sometimes have a low glow to them, not as bright as Kasia's, but noticeable if one was specifically looking for it. Another feature I noticed, typically belonging to mages who practiced a lot of necromancy, was a mixture of pallid skin and a thinness to them, as if they hadn't eaten in days. Regardless of the physical change, I've always had this strange ability to pick out mages from a crowd. While odd, I didn't take this skill of mine for granted since it's been especially helpful whenever our team had to fight groups, as the magic casters could be the most dangerous if left to their own devices. Guess the gang's all here, Peter remarked as Kasia and Nina joined us at the table. A forewarning for you, Kasia, Cassius Karth was asking about you a bit earlier. He's going to be on the same escort mission that you're performing. Thanks for the heads up. Anything he was asking about in particular? Kasia asked with that mischievous interest of hers. Just about your strengths and abilities. We told him to ask you himself, both because it didn't seem right to talk about you while you weren't here, and because Cassius is an asshole. Lucrute nearly decked him earlier and I didn't want a fistfight breaking out. As Peter said this, I had the decency to look away from Kasia and Nina's stares. I'll keep that in mind while speaking with him. Kasia assured us before changing the topic. Have you three managed to find a job yet, or are you still looking? Not yet. It's a bit slow in the morning and none of the jobs being offered right now were worth the measly pay. Dine answered. Then it looks to be your lucky day, Kasia said with a playful smirk. One of my recent business partners, Feria, is in need of an escort to the village of Karni to pick up some ingredients. He originally wanted me on the job, but since I'm already going to be occupied with traveling to Tob in a few days, I recommended the rest of you instead. That sounded interesting, especially since I've never been to Karni before. Usually, it was because there weren't many jobs that came from the village, but it was also a dangerous place since it was near the borders of the slain theocracy and Baharuth Empire. With the tensions that Riastais had with both countries, it made Karni a prime staging ground for one of the two countries to invade. What's the pay like? Peter asked. Each of you will receive 10 silver for accepting the mission, and another 5 for completing it. Now, that was a tempting offer. The trip to and from Karni village would take about 3 or 4 days, yet we'd be making a combined 60 silver from doing it. Possibly more if we hunted some animals on the way and took their pelts. Pretty good pay for an escort. I remarked, I'm up for it. I'm in agreement, especially since we might be seeing competition for jobs in the upcoming weeks. Dine answered, causing both Nina and Kasha to give the druid curious looks. Sounds like an easy job that pays well. I am also willing. With Peter's reply, that left Nina, who hesitated for a moment before agreeing. It was understandable since she'd be leaving her sister alone for the next few days, and considering that the two had only recently reunited, that was a hard choice to make. I can do it. She then turned to Kasha, would you mind watching out for Tyr while we're gone? Don't worry about your sister, she'll be perfectly safe while you're gone. Meepo will also be watching Tyr when I leave, and that kobold is probably one of the strongest people in Rantel at the moment. She'll be safe. Kasha's reassurance made Nina smile and nod. On the other hand, I felt an ominous dread at how casually Kasha declared the terrifying kobold as one of the strongest beings in the city. After all, Meepo had shown how protective he was towards anyone attempting to court Kasha. With that settled, Nferya wanted to leave the city in the next hour, so he'll come to the guild to meet up with you. Lucrute and Nina, you two are on acquiring rations, Peter said, taking charge as group leader. This was pretty usual for Nina and I to get rations. One of the reasons was that we were good at acquiring long-lasting food, but the other reason was because we were physically weaker than Dine and Peter. Dine and I will get supplies. We'll meet back here within 30 minutes for any last-ditch preparations. What'll you be doing, Kasha? I'm going to speak with Cassius while you prepare. I'll see the four of you off before you leave. Kasha added as we all stood up from the table together and headed off to perform our assigned tasks. I didn't like that she was going to meet with that asshole alone, but I'd have to accept her choice. Even though I knew that Kasha is a strong mage and could take care of herself, I just had this feeling of complete revulsion at the thought of Kasha meeting Cassius. Pushing these feelings down, I rushed off with the others to gather our supplies. Kasha. With the others going off to perform their assigned tasks, I asked around for Cassius Karth. It wasn't a long search at all, especially due to the amount of hatred that this guy had accrued among the other guild members. From what I learned, the guy was known for taking all the easy, well-paying jobs that was considered a taboo in the guild, especially if the job was below your rank. Regardless, it did make me wonder as to why he had taken the Magicians Guild's escort mission, considering that it was going to the Great Forest of Tob, an area that was considered deadly to travel due to the monsters inhabiting it. For a guy known for taking easy jobs, this was the opposite of his typical actions. There was definitely something else going on behind the scenes that I couldn't put a finger on. Regardless, from the information given to me, I quickly was able to spot Cassius sitting at a table while reading from a leather-bound book. As I approached him, my eyes took in the pristine look of his armor. Either that set of armor was enchanted or he rarely got involved in combat. It would be good to note that bit of information for later, as I'd be working with him in a few days. "Excuse me?" I asked as I arrived in front of Cassius. He quickly looked up from his book and I felt his eyes trailing up and down my body before his eyes finally met mine. "My teammates told me that you wanted to talk." "Of course, Miss Blanc. Do you mind if I call you Kasha? We'll be working together soon, after all," Cassius asked with a charming tone that seemed opposite of the way the others in the guild portrayed him as. This didn't do much to change my opinion of the man, as I'd encountered enough well-spoken assholes that'd stab you in the back as soon as it increased their standings. "Sure, you can. I don't care about formalities like some do," I answered with an even tone. "Interesting book you have there. I don't see many in the guild that do much reading unless they have to." Cassius smiled while closing the book and setting it down. "It's a bestiary of the creatures within and around the Great Forest of Tob. I like to be prepared for missions before going on them. Learning about what we might be encountering in Tob ensures a better chance of survival and success. Is that what led you to ask my teammates about me?" "It's one of the reasons. Due to your recent arrival in the guild, there's not much information about you besides hearsay and rumors. You can see why I'm a bit curious. That's reasonable, yet I had no true interest in revealing much about my abilities. And are you asking the same about the others that we'll be working with, or am I just special? Of 6 adventurers that have been hired for this mission, I know that 2 are a pair of silverplate twins that are average sword fighters. One is a skilled goldplate monk that only performs jobs to afford his booze. Another is a silverplate ranger that is more coward than adventurer. Then, there's myself, who I am intimately acquainted with. Finally, there's you, the unknown sorceress that, until recently, was one of the newest copper plates in the guild. Sounds like an interesting set of personalities. Unfortunately for you, I subscribe to the adage that a good magician never reveals their secrets. I answered with a smirk. If he was upset at my response, Cassius did well at hiding his emotions. I see. Is there anything that you could inform me about yourself, just to reassure me that you won't be a hindrance to the mission? You'll just have to trust me when I say that I can take care of myself. Probably even better than you can take care of yourself. Cassius gave me a dry look at my statement. Noted. Hopefully, you'll be able to back up these claims during the mission. Until then, I'll make sure to keep an eye on you. He then smirked after this remark. Then again, it's not entirely difficult or unpleasing to do so in the first place. Giving the man a raised eyebrow, I replied, I tend to get remarks along those lines quite often. But, to be nice, I'll tell you that my magic skills are above a silverplate's. Take that information as you will. Following this, I walked away from Cassius to let him think over my statement. As I left Cassius, I made a mental note to take care with the spells and skills I displayed around him. Unlike most, he seemed the type of person to heavily study and scrutinize my abilities. It would be a small risk to stay around him, since he could potentially discover my lack of humanity if he looked hard enough. While my kitsune illusion hid my tails and ears, it didn't hide inherent aspects of my biology, like my sense of smell, sight, hearing, or my enhanced ability with magic. And those were just some of my more obvious traits that couldn't be hidden. While I doubted that anyone could discern my true race, it wasn't a far-off possibility of someone figuring out that I wasn't human. And yet, such an event didn't so much as frighten me as it did excite me. By now, hiding my race felt less like an everyday risk and more like a game. At this point, I felt like I was breaking a world record. Each day undiscovered was another to add to the scoreboard. Unfortunately, the more I thought about my illusion, the more that random information behind the mechanics and processes of the spell filled my mind, giving me a mild headache. It had been like this since I woke up this morning. I cast a spell and information would seemingly burst into my brain like fireworks. While the headache seemed to be lessening as the day went on, I needed to master a way of controlling these information bursts so that they wouldn't impact me as much as they did now. An idea that I'd come up with this morning to control these bursts involved casting a simple spell repeatedly until I finally forced the information bursts to stop. Taking a seat at an empty chair on the first floor, I cast the spell, Illusionary Orb, in my hand. What came from this was a small, translucent, blue ball which gently floated in the palm of my hand. This spell, when used by other casters, could be formed as a non-damaging replica of other spell effects in order to trip up an opponent. But, when used by a holder of the Chosen of Loki class, it would deal damage due to the class making illusionary spell effects real. After creating this orb in hand, the small burst of information filled my mind. Then, I dispelled the effect before once again casting it in hand. Each time I did this, I mentally commanded for the information to stop. Once in a while, the information would cease, yet it wasn't an often enough occurrence to label my training as making much headway. I'm not entirely certain on how long I'd been casting this spell as I entered a state of hyperfocus, but I was pulled out of it when I heard someone call my name. Ceasing the spell, I looked up and spotted the familiar blonde hair of Nferia. "Hello again, Miss Blanc." Nferia greeted with a smile. Giving him a nod and waving him over, I said, "Good news, Nferia, the rest of my team agreed to escort you to Carney Village. They are just out, at the moment, to gather supplies for the journey. What about you? Setting the canvas bag that he was carrying onto the ground, I got a good sniff of salted meats and bread within the bag. Then, Feuer took a seat next to me. That's a relief. I was slightly worried that they wouldn't accept the job. Not many adventurers are willing to travel up to that area, considering the tales of the slain Baharuth soldiers being spotted near the area. I wouldn't worry too much about the tales of soldiers. Technically, adventurers are considered neutral in kingdom politics, which makes it in the best interests of other kingdoms to avoid killing adventurers, as they could receive retaliation from their country's branch of the Adventurers Guild, I said in an attempt to reassure the teen. Still, you can't expect the possibility that something wrong might occur. If that ever happens, then I'll typically have multiple contingency plans in place to fall back upon. Regardless, I give you my personal reassurance that nothing wrong will happen, and if something does, I quickly cast a spell to create a talisman of an allied beacon in my hand, which I handed to the teen. He took it with a questioning look before examining the object. What is this? Consider it an insurance policy. If you're ever in a situation where you and the others are in danger, just hold on to that object and think of me. It'll bail you guys out of danger. Just remember though, it only works once. So, use it wisely. Feuer bashfully nodded his head before carefully pocketing the item. Thank you, Miss Blanc. I will make sure to keep this item safe. Smirking at the teen, I playfully flicked him on the side of his head. Your life matters more than a simple item. Avoid being stingy with it since you only have one life. I understand, Miss Blanc. Feuer answered as he rubbed the back of his head. You know, you don't have to call me Miss Blanc. I'm not that formal. Sorry, Miss BL, I mean, Kasha. It's just that after everything you showed and told my grandmother and I, it's just hard to not to treat you with great respect. I patted him on the back and smirked. You don't need to apologize. You haven't done anything wrong, after all, I reassured the kid before changing the subject. By the way, what kind of herb only grows out around Carney Village? Seems like it'd be a smarter idea to try and find a method to cultivate it in the city. Would save you a trip otherwise. Feuer tried to avoid my gaze after I asked this. I even noticed that his face turned a little red along with a scent of hormones that emanated from him. Well, there's also a person in Carney that I like to visit whenever possible. Going out to collect herbs also gives me an excuse to visit. I couldn't help but giggle like a schoolgirl as I finally pieced everything together. Little Feuer had a girlfriend in Carney that he wanted to see. What's her name? That got the boy's attention as he turned to me with shock and an extremely red face. How did you know it's a girl? From your demeanor along with what I could smell from your body, it was obvious that there's someone that lives in the village which you have an attraction to. Though, I could have been wrong if it turned out that you preferred your gender. But the simplest answer is that you have an absolutely terrible poker face. Oh, he said with embarrassment. You said that you could smell it on me. What did you mean by that? Compared to most people you'll encounter, my senses are highly advanced. My hearing is good enough to pick up quiet conversations in rowdy places, and my sense of smell is pretty much unparalleled. It does tend to be a bit of a curse in large cities since I can smell everything, good and bad. You were giving off enough hormones to make it obvious that you're attracted to someone within that village. The teen blushed before nodded. Her name is Henry. We've known each other for years, but I found it hard to tell her how I feel about her. I'm worried that I'll screw it up and hurt our relationship, Feuer said with a small bit of shame. Feuer, there's a famous quote from my home that might help you here: "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." Nothing will happen if you don't try to ask this girl. Girls like confidence, and you have to be confident when confessing your feelings to someone. But what if I put a finger on Feuer's lips to silence him? No what ifs. Besides, you've got plenty of things going for you. You're smart, not that bad looking, and you've got a well-paying profession and skills to match it. If you wait too long, someone else will snatch up this girl before you can. He was silent for a time, contemplating what I had said. Then, He looked back at me with a soft smile and nodded. "I'll try it," Furrier said with a bit of confidence. I simply nodded while my interest in Furrier's courting outcome grew. It also made me wonder if I could try and push Nina into the dating scene, since that girl needed more confidence in herself. Before I could ponder any further on future activities for my apprentice, the scent of Lucrute and Nina appeared at the guild, glad to be of assistance. "Speaking of, half of your hired help has just arrived at the guild." I nodded my head at the entrance where the two just entered. I waved my hand at the duo and gained their attention. They hurriedly walked up to our table and set a pair of bags down where scent of salt and pork emanated heavily from within them. "It looks like we managed to beat Peter and Dine to the guild." "Even better, you managed to find the client, Kasha," Lucrute said with excitement. "How are you this morning, Furrier?" "I'm doing well, Lucrute. I was just conversing with Kasha before you arrived," Furrier replied. "How long do you think it'll be before your other teammates arrive?" I remained quiet when said teammates strode through the entrance and picked out our group from the crowd. "With Peter and Dine, they'll typically arrive at the guild around the same time that we have, give or take a few minutes," Nina helpfully replied. "Make that just a minute," Peter said, announcing his and Dine's presence while also causing Nina, Furrier, and Lucrute to jump in surprise. "Nice to see that everyone's arrived. Worry not, we've come with provisions." To demonstrate this, Peter and Dine dropped a set of packs onto the table. "Seems that all of you are set to go on your job," I remarked before focusing on Nina. "While you're traveling, kiddo, try to find a way to combine your spells to enhance each other. I'll be excited to see what you come up with when we see each other again." The young mage nodded, making me chuckle. "Try to stay safe on your mission, everyone. We've still got to have those drinks at the bar. Just another reason to make it back safe to you, my beautiful sorceress." Rolling my eyes at Lucrute's reply, I watched my team and Furrier stand from the table. "Good luck on your job, Kasha. See you in a few days," Dine said with a warm tone as he picked up his pack, followed by the other soon following the action. "Make sure to come back and tell us about all the interesting details of your job when you return," Peter asked, which I answered with a nod while watching the group of 4 start leaving the guild. At the very least, I was satisfied with the knowledge that if they were to get into anything beyond their ability to handle, Furrier would be able to use the gift I gave him, which would allow me to bail them out of trouble. That said, I felt a bit of amusement knowing that I needn't bring that many supplies with me due to my crafting abilities. I could easily conjure myself a tent and bed if needed. While some foods could be summoned or conjured with a few abilities that I knew, the methods weren't fully tested, which made it a safer bet to gather non-magical rations beforehand. I wouldn't need many rations, since I could just cast a permanent, enlarge, on them, which would give me more than enough food to last me the few days my journey into Tob would take. On that note, I was torn between being worried and excited at the idea that some of the residents within the forest might recognize me, even without my furry appendages visible, and out me to the rest of the party that I'd be traveling with. Perhaps I could change my appearance some, maybe wear a hat? I'd have to figure that out when I arrived at that point. Taking a moment to stretch my arms above my head, while also ignore a few of the obvious stares around me, I heard a satisfying pop and got up from the table. It was time to get to work, since I couldn't just sit around here all day. Acquiring supplies early would be the best idea, since I had an immense amount of time to kill. 7 hours later, after a long day of acquiring supplies, exploring the city, and practicing a few spells, I found myself sitting on a couch within my sanctuary reading a history book that I had bought earlier. While it wasn't as detailed as I would have liked, it offered a bit of information that I hadn't known before. For instance, the Reestize kingdom had one of, if not the, largest cavalry units out of all the surrounding countries. In fact, their cavalry units were considered some of the best due to the Reestize's belief that cavalry was what won wars, making them focus specifically upon improving those units. At the same time, magic was looked down upon, both by the army and many nobles, due to their belief that it was weak and cowardly for a warrior to rely upon tactics that didn't utilize their own physical strength. I couldn't help but burst out laughing when I reached this passage. It was pretty obvious that whoever was running this kingdom's military was a complete moron. Back on my world, it'd be like a military that abhorred using guns because it was dishonorable. It wouldn't matter about how honorable a method was when the side with guns kills you before you can get near. With the lack of mages in the military, I was absolutely astounded at how the Riestais has managed to almost keep their yearly war with the Baharith Empire at a standstill. Either the soldiers of the Riestais were badass if they weren't getting wiped out by a salvo of fireballs, or they just had a huge number of reserves to replace the charred remains of the dead. It would explain why the Magicians' Guild had been established. Someone with a lot of resources, but not enough political power, probably saw the obvious flaws in the military and tried to create an organization to compensate. It would also explain why the Magicians' Guild doesn't receive any funding, even though the organization served under the government. Aside from that, the kingdom's political landscape was an absolute mess. Multiple chunks of the country were divided up between many nobles that ruled their territories with different laws and standards. This led to a kingdom that was extremely decentralized, with infighting of different nobles being frequent. I wouldn't doubt that the king of the Riestais was more like a figurehead than a ruler, as he only had enough authority as the other nobles would allow him. If the Baharith Empire was smart, they'd only need to buy the loyalty of a few nobles to crush the Riestais from the inside. The fact that they were instead throwing away thousands of lives every year on the Katsa Plains in order to shrink the Riestais' army was immensely wasteful. Before I could read any further, the door to the cabin opened and Tyr and Meepo stepped inside. From the massive smile on the girl's face, it was obvious to see that she had certainly enjoyed her first day. Not that I expected anything to go wrong, since I had Meepo act as her unseen protector today. "Hello, Kasha," Tyr answered before looking around the building for something or, more likely, someone. "Where are Nina and the others? I would have expected them to be here with you." "Nina and our friends are going on an escort job for a few days." When I explained that, Tyr gave a worried look. "Don't worry, it's just a simple escort job to Kani village. They are strong enough to take care of themselves, and I've given them an insurance policy in case anything was to go wrong." "That's good to hear. I guess I'm just still used to the times when I had to look out for Nina when we were younger," Tyr said with relief while I nodded in agreement. Setting my book aside, I snapped my fingers and caused a large couch to materialize in front of me. "Now, why don't you come on over, take a seat, and tell me about your day? No doubt the both of you would enjoy taking a load off." "Thank you, Kasha," Tyr said as she walked over to the couch with Meepo and sat down upon it. After doing so, she started to work on removing her boots. Meepo took the time to soften up his spot on the couch before settling into it like a cat. Meepo has performed the task Mistress assigned with perfection. Tyr was protected from all harm while Meepo remained undiscovered by any watcher. "Meepo is great at stealth," the little kobold said with excitement before he began to shiver in pleasure as his charge stroked his back. "Today was quite a rush. Miss Celica spent some time teaching me how to cook certain meals, know the differences between ales, even methods on how to deal with unruly customers." She then smirked while looking down at Meepo, though I wasn't that worried since I knew that Meepo was watching over me. "Seems like you had fun," I remarked. "Make any new friends, or are you still working on it?" There was another worker named Marin who I talked to a bit. I can't exactly call us friends since we just met, but she was quite nice to me and helped me when she could. It appears that this job was turning out to be a good fit for Tyr. She was getting the chance to meet different people, learn new skills, and gain a sense of normality. Right now, Tyr just needed a few constants in her life to rehabilitate her. A stable job, housing, and companionship would fit the criteria, and while Nina or myself might not always be here, due to jobs, I'd have Meepo stay close by to her to act as another constant. For a long while, Tyr, Meepo, and I just chatted. Sometimes it was about random events that happened during the day, other times it was just different topics. It felt nice to have such a mundane conversation. I didn't need to worry about tasks that I needed to accomplish, dangers that had to be faced, the duties that I had to fulfill. I could just be myself and ignore the world for these simple moments. Little did I know, but simple moments like these would become harder to find in the future. Day 9. Yawning lightly, I couldn't help but find myself a little annoyed that this mission started at the crack of dawn. I enjoyed my beauty sleep, and I hated having to wake up early in the morning. My only solace in all of this was that I'd be getting paid and earning a new rank in the guild. The one good thing about it being so early in the morning was that the streets weren't as crowded with citizens as it would be later on. It made for a peaceful walk. At least, it would have if not for the stench of a corpse hung about the streets. I might have said that someone had died recently, but the stench that filled my nostrils was from something that had been dead for a long time. I needed to get to the bottom of this, as either some undead had managed to escape from the cemetery or a hidden body was being exposed to the air. Turning around the corner of one street, I was quickly brought face to face with a pair of cloaked travelers. One of these travelers, a serious-looking woman, might have appeared normal to a regular human, but I could tell from her scent that she was anything but. I couldn't exactly pinpoint what she was, but I knew that she was definitely not human. Walking next to her was a being fully enclosed in a suit of dark armor. The armored one stood head and shoulders above the woman, and from the massive swords strapped to their back, they were quite strong. Yet, the scent of a corpse wafted from within the armor. This person was highly likely to be one of the undead. Before I could make further observations, the armored being said one thing that shook me to my very core. "Fox 13-inch," and the sudden bang. "Fox 13-inch?" the large, armored figure asked with shock. My heart thumped in my chest like a hammer as I quickly jogged over to him. Each step I took filled with me with greater joy. I had finally met someone who I could truly relate to. I had finally found another person from my world. While I was jogging over to the large man, I tried to recall if I'd ever encountered someone of his description before. Unfortunately, nothing came to mind as his armor didn't spark any form of recognition for me, and I'm certain that I'd remember hearing a baritone voice like his before in Yggdrasil. Looking to his partner, I couldn't recall ever meeting a player like her before, and I was fairly good at recognizing faces. Either way, it didn't take long for me to arrive before the pair. With a wide grin, I broke the silence between us. "You don't know how glad I am to finally find someone else from Yggdrasil." The armored figure nodded in agreement. "The feeling is quite mutual, Fox 13-inch." Hearing this guy say my Yggdrasil name made me feel a bit embarrassed. It was one thing for such a name to be used in just a video game where there weren't supposed to be any consequences that'd transfer to real life, but in a sense, this new world was my real life. By the way, I actually go by the name of Kasha Blanc since I've arrived here. But, since we're trading names, mind telling me who you are? You and your companion don't appear recognizable to me. From the corner of my eye, I noticed how the purple-haired woman was about to interject until the armored man held his hand in front of her. "Excuse my manners. Kasha. I'm just surprised that I finally encountered another player since arriving here, much less you in particular. My name is Momonga, though I'm going by Momon while wearing this armor." As soon as Momonga said this, I was drawn back to what I knew about the guy. He is or was, a guild leader of Ain's Ul Gaun, the guild most known for being one of the strongest guilds in the game, having the most world items out of any other guild, and only allowing members into their guild that were a heteromorphic race. In addition, Momonga was an undead lich who used utility spells. If I had to guess, he was currently using the spell, Perfect Warrior, to wear and equip that armor and pair of swords. While the pair of us had never engaged in face-to-face PvP, I had certainly done some ping of his guildmates due to some of the jobs that I undertook. At the very least, he didn't appear to hold a grudge. A lot of emphasis had to be put on appear. Though, it wasn't like I could tell what he was thinking with that helmet on his head. Or without it, considering that his race was just a skeleton. Now that I think about it, I'm certainly glad that I chose a body which could touch, taste, and experience life, even if that wasn't my original plan when making my character. Momonga must be having one hell of a time adjusting, considering that he couldn't eat, drink, or rest anymore. Poor bastard. Following Momonga's introduction, his partner finally spoke. My name is Nabril Gamma, one of the members of the Pleiades and servant to Nazarick. Though, while in this disguise with my lord, I am known as Nobe. As Nabril said this, I quickly put the pieces together on who she was. Nabril isn't a player, is she? No. She's one of the NPCs of my guild that came with me when I arrived in this world. That answer made me a bit wary. From the way he said it, she wasn't the only thing that came with him from Yggdrasil. What about the other NPCs? I asked, careful to make my question innocent enough. The others are currently collecting intel on this new world and adjusting Nazarick to our new location. Oh, shit. While I was happy, and quite jealous, that Momonga's entire guild base came with him to this world, it also brought a bit of problems with the NPCs. In addition to Ain's Ulgaun being one of the strongest guilds around, they were also known for role-playing as villains. I had Meepo Bripo designed as a helpful being for his background, and he followed that background closely. What would happen if a bunch of NPCs with villainous or monstrous backgrounds were set loose upon this world? In addition, it was very likely that many of these NPCs would have high levels in comparison to this world inhabitants. Momonga, how many of the NPCs in your guild came with you? And how many of them have backstories that paint them as horrific villains? Why are you so curious about that? Momonga asked with a neutral tone, because you may have just sent a bunch of monsters out into the world without any supervision. Innocent people might have just been put in danger and their deaths could attract the wrong sort of attention. I gave him both an appeal to doing what was morally right and a rational issue that could occur. In addition, while I kept a calm appearance, I was internally freaking out about the havoc that could occur. You don't need to worry. Any of the scouts that have been sent out are under the strict orders to observe and not interact. If it would help, I can add an order to not kill anyone unless in self-defense. I nodded in relief at the offer. Hopefully, I just saved a few people from getting killed by hungry monsters. Thanks for that, crisis averted, I said with appreciation. NPCs aside, have you noticed anything strange about your body? Thoughts or feelings that weren't there before? Momonga was silent for a moment as he processed my question, then he answered. I can't feel emotion. Whenever I'm on the cusp of feeling something, my body suppresses it. I guess the reason is due to being an undead lich, though I have noticed that certain types of undead NPCs seem to experience emotion. Then again, that may just be them acting it out rather than truly feeling. That's gotta be tough to deal with, knowing that you should, and previously had been able to, experience emotions, yet aren't. It must be maddening. What about you? There have been a few tendencies and urges that I've felt. One of them is the urge to pull pranks. In addition, my views on people and topics have shifted some, not enough to hinder, but it is noticeable. As I said this, the sun's rays began hitting my eyes as the sun rose more. This made me conscious about the fact that I had a mission which needed to be completed. While it is a great pleasure to meet the pair of you, I have a job that I need to get to. I see. If you don't mind me asking, your job wouldn't have to involve the Adventurers Guild by chance? It does. How do you know about the Adventurers Guild? Before coming to this city, I had reconnaissance performed to prepare for the journey. Nabril and I plan to sign up as adventurers to build a reputation and potentially use it to find other players. Momonga responded. I nodded in agreement with his answer. Good plan. I should give you some warning, they have a test to see if you're literate or not. Unless you can read the language in this world, I'd recommend for you to have a spell or item that can translate. In addition, if you plan on shacking up in town for your cover, try the Hero's Respite. Prices are manageable, and I'm also rooming there. Thanks for the assistance. Would you be willing to meet sometime later to trade information? The tall figure asked with interest. It'll have to be much later since my job will be taking a few days to finish. I can probably sneak away later after midnight tonight when the rest of my traveling companions are asleep and meet you in your room at the Hero's Respite. I answered with a smile. That works. In addition to discussing what we've discovered about this new world, we could try working together in planning our next steps. I held my hand out and watched as Momonga shook it with his gauntleted hand. I'll look forward to working with you. See you later tonight, Kasha. Same, I said with a nod. Nice to see you again, Momonga. And it was a pleasure to meet you, Nabril, said woman looked at me with surprise when I included her. Oh, thank you, Lady Fox 13 I mean, Lady Kasha. It was an experience to meet you. With a nod and a smirk, I broke my handshake with Momonga and began walking away. This was an unexpected turn of events, but it wasn't unwanted. I might need to change some of my plans to accommodate for Momonga, but that should not be that much of a hindrance. In fact, Momonga could potentially help me with a few ideas that I couldn't accomplish by myself without a lot of work. Yet, as I was leaving the pair to their own devices, my ears picked up Nabril's whispering to Momonga. Are you certain that it is a good idea to trust Fox 13-Ich? She is a known wild card and has hindered other supreme beings in the past. That was certainly true in Yggdrasil, but things are different now, especially because our goals align with one another's this time. We are all stuck in this new world together. Previous grudges need to be forgotten as continued fighting will get us nothing but wasted time and resources. We need allies in this world and Kasha is one of the only people here that is in the same situation as us. I was happy to hear that Momonga was taking this entire situation sensibly. Putting aside my thoughts about this surprise encounter with another player from Yggdrasil, I hurried my pace to make up for lost time to the Magician's Guild. Tonight would certainly be an interesting one to say the least. Quickly casting message, I gave my copy a quick rundown of what had just transpired. So, what are you planning to do about this? And I'm not talking about getting away from the Magician's Guild's group since you'll probably have me take your place during the night in order to cover for you. I'm talking about this player, Momonga. My copy asked in a serious tone. As it is, we're both in the same situation. Both of us were humans transported to this world as our characters. We both came from the same shithole that we left. Even if Momonga won't admit it, we're the only ones in this world who could fully relate to one another. It's in the best interests for both of us if we were to ally with one another. Have you at least considered a backup plan in case everything goes to hell? From all that he's admitted, Momonga has an entire guild and its resources and NPCs at his beck and call. What happens if he were to turn on you? Just because the two of you are allies at the moment due to your shared experiences doesn't mean that he won't turn on you later down the line if you were to go against his ideas. I momentarily scowled at how correct my copy was. I'd like to believe that Momonga and I could remain permanent allies, but I'd seen enough allies turn on each other, both on Earth and in Yggdrasil, if the benefits to doing so were good enough. In addition, Momonga told me that his ability to feel emotions was suppressed. I don't know how deeply that suppression went, but it could be enough to affect his ability to empathize with others. While I doubted that he'd go off the deep end like a typical fantasy lich by sucking out the souls of the living to empower himself, there could be a gradual change over time. Perhaps by killing a defenseless enemy since it would be easier to deal with than keeping them a prisoner. Maybe the next time, he'd decide to experiment on the next enemy since he already planned on killing them. It's just that this time he'd get something from them this time. It just took a simple choice to jump onto an extremely slippery path since a person could always reason to themselves that, I just did a little bad thing last time, what I'm doing now isn't as worse. If I was going to ally with Momonga, I think the largest priority is to monitor his mental health and, if needed, act as a moral compass for the lich. You're right. I admitted. Of course, I am. I'm you. After all. She boasted, what should we do in preparation? Set up a few, Anit information magic walls, at important key locations in Haven Lake. Following this, set up multiple detection spells around the village to see who is coming and going in case we start getting spies. I answered quickly as more plans began to formulate in my mind. And if we catch any spies? Capture and interrogate. If Momonga were to complain that we captured one of his spies, we'll deny that we knew it was his spy. If we are required to release any spies, wipe their memories and send them on their way. I replied before adding, while not needed immediately, I'd like to create a hidden fallout bunker that could fit the town's population. Tell no one else about this. I'll scout out locations for it later. Anything else that you'd like added? Nothing else at the moment. I'll contact you later for the switch, so try and avoid having any important events needing our direct attention scheduled around midnight. Got it. See you later, boss. With that, the message was ended and I quickly changed my train of thought over to the mission today. Looking ahead, I spotted a flight of stairs that went up to a large, Gothic building made of white stone. Multiple decorative domes with spike pointing to the sky dotted the top of the building while 4 square pillars surrounded the door. Yesterday, I remembered asking Nina what she knew about the place, and she wasn't kidding when she mentioned how it looked more like a noble's manor than it did a guild. Either they were using a lot of guild funding to create buildings like this, or they had mages create the buildings through pure magic. I was more convinced of the latter theory due to how I couldn't spot any seams in the stone that made up the walls. It just looked like a whole mountain of stone had been carved into walls and windows. It was certainly an elegantly designed building. When I finally arrived at the front door, I was pleasantly surprised to find it opening by itself and letting me walk inside the well-lit entrance hall which was covered in red carpeting. These mages certainly invested a lot into home decor. To my left was an alcove with a desk that a pale boy sat behind. He seemed to be furiously writing in a book, so I walked past him and focused on the gathering further in the hall. While it might have seemed like an ordinary gathering of mages, what stood out were the multiple people among them that were dressed in clothing more fit for warriors. My eyes also landed on Cassius among that group, and he gave me a nod to acknowledge my presence. It was after his action that more of the group noticed my approach. One of them, a thin, pale man, approached me with an even smile and eyes that scanned my body, not with any form of lust, but as if looking for something in particular. Good morning, Miss Blanc. My name is Theo Ruksha, and I would like to say that it is a great pleasure to meet you. He pleasantly greeted while holding out his hand to me. I shook it in turn and noticed the well-hidden shiver that came from his body at my touch before replying, same could be said about you, after all, you're the guild master of the Magician's Guild. In comparison, I only just arrived in this city over a week ago, which makes me greatly curious about your interest in me, enough so that you'd personally request me for this job. I said the rest of this in a more hushed tone for any potential listeners. It's true that you've only recently arrived to Rantel, but you've been making a bit of a name for yourself since then. Especially from the tales I hear of your prowess in magic. Any guild master of a magician's guild worth their salt would be interested in one that can cast third-tier spells. After saying this in an equally hushed tone, he ended the handshake and met my eyes with barely contained excitement. I'd be highly interested in further private discussion later on the road. It seems that I need to brief everyone on the details of our mission now that you've finally arrived. I gave Theo an understanding nod and joined the rest of the team while Theo led us all out of the open lobby and into a single room. He then turned to the gathered group and spoke. Good morning, everyone. Since we finally have our group assembled, I believe it is time for me to explain why you've all been brought here. As some of you might have guessed, this is not a normal trek into the great forest of Tob. It has recently come to the Magician's Guild's attention that a massive tower-like structure has been magically conjured on the lake. Our goal is to travel to this structure and uncover its origins or bring anything back that might be useful to the guild. Theo gestured to a nearby mage who set 6 small pouches onto the table which jingled with coins. Well, fuck. I may be in a bit of trouble. They will likely encounter the Green Claw tribe at the lake, and since all of them know what I look like, that is going to cause a clusterfuck. I can't just suddenly change my appearance or cancel the quest because that would seem suspicious and hurt my reputation. Though, that doesn't mean that I can't convince the tribe to either stay away from the tree for a day or to remain quiet about my identity. I'll have to try and meet with Shaziryu soon to arrange something. Be aware, once you accept these coins, you're bound to this task. If any of you were to try and cheat our guild, then you'll be disbarred from the Adventurers Guild and declared an enemy of the kingdom, Theo stated darkly. This warning didn't deter the 6 of us as we each picked up a sack and pocketed them away. Fun warning. A man with long, dark, unkempt hair spoke up. He wore a simple green robe that was strategically cut to allow for a full amount of movement. The only possessions that this man seemed to own was a necklace of large wooden beads, a gourd that reeked of strong alcohol, and a small sack on his hip that smelled of dried meats. This was probably the drunken monk that Cassius had told me of earlier. Doubt that any adventurer here would be that foolish to piss off a guild for a few coins. While your observation is noted, Mr. Carnan, I still find it prudent to warn all of you beforehand. Theo answered with a wry smile. Carnan nodded before removing the gourd from his hip and taking a swig from it. This was when a rough female voice came from a blonde woman that was completely covered in chainmail with a rapier at her side. If we were to find anything of value at this tower, are we allowed to keep it? Yes, Miss Andra. If you were to find anything valuable, you would be allowed to keep it. But be aware that we of the Magicians Guild would pay quite handsomely for any object of magical interest. The woman named Andra seemed quite pleased with the answer before silently communication with the blonde man next to her dressed in the same fashion as her, except that he wielded a broadsword. Those were probably the twins. If there are no other questions, then we should get moving. We've much ground to cover and I'd like for us to utilize these daylight hours effectively, Theo said with an oddly chipper tone that seemed jarring to the seriousness of the guild master's previous words. Then again, considering that most mages in this world need to go through years of studying and training in order to cast spells, it would be a bit appropriate to assume that many mages are a bit underdeveloped in social skills. Though, I definitely wouldn't qualify myself with that group considering all the people that I've swayed to my side of thinking due to my sheer force of personality. Nina though, I might need to work on coaxing her out of some of her timidness. Either way, that was a task for another day. Right now, it was time to go on this quest and hopefully not have my powerful, non-human identity outed to the guilds. Riding in a horse-drawn wagon was certainly an experience. It was bumpy, the horse stank, and there were quite a few people sitting with me on the wagon. Sitting opposite of me was Theo while 2 of his mages sat further down from us. Following those 2 were multiple crates of supplies. That was just one wagon as 3 more trailed behind us while a mage dressed in animal furs lead the way. Honestly, being a magic user with a proclivity to wear animal furs should have you labeled as a druid. I've played more than enough RPGs to have seen that trope played out. I think this mage was just in denial about being a druid, but I kept these thoughts to myself. It's best to not upset the guide through the forest, even if I had personally made the forest a safer place a few days ago. Now that we have a moment alone together, I was interested in learning a bit more about you. Theo spoke up, grabbing my attention. Oh, and what exactly would you like to learn? I asked with amusement. I know that you're able to perform 3rd-tier spells, but how many spells do you know? How long did it take for you to learn such spells? More importantly, where did you learn these spells? Theo asked with great interest. Starting with your first question, I know enough. As for learning these spells, I would say within a few weeks to learn multiple spells. The way that Theo's eyes were popping open made me giggle before I decided to answer the final question. As for where I learned these spells, the land and kingdom I come from is ruled by my mother, Inori. She's one of, if not the, strongest sorceresses in the land and she acted as a teacher for me. If you were going to ask how she taught me, well, I would certainly admit to it being brutal. And considering all the bullshit I had to go through to level up my racial classes in Yggdrasil, brutal would be a massive understatement. Theo seemed to retreat into deep thought where I heard him mutter under his breath, Inori. I'll need to research this person later. I smirked to myself and leaned back into my seat on the wagon. With your inherent magical power and talent, and pedigree of nobility, why would you lower yourself to the level of a common adventurer? Theo asked with some disbelief. I don't consider this to be lowering myself. In fact, I consider my current career to be both enlightening and honorable. At Theo's confused stare, I decided to continue, Would you be able to count on one hand the number of nobles in this entire kingdom that have ever willingly spent long periods of time among the commoners without any ulterior motives? Unfortunately, the only noble that would immediately come to mind is Princess Rena. Theo answered. And has Princess Rena ever performed a hard day's labor, or did she have someone else to do it for her? A few times, she actually has. But most of the time it's her servants that will perform manual labor. I couldn't help but smirk at the answer. At least one noble could get off of their high horse. But after these days of hard work, the princess gets to go home to a warm bed with a belly full of food and drink, and is protected from any threats to her life. She could never truly know or possibly understand what it's like to survive a winter without shelter, the gnawing hunger and desperation that comes from not eating for days, the paranoia that someone might try to rob or rape her because she doesn't have someone or something with which to protect herself. Yet, I still can't understand why you wouldn't just aid the people while also ruling them. It wouldn't require having to do all of this dangerous work. Theo asked while curiously watching for what I'd say next. There's a famous saying from my home, to understand someone, you must walk a mile in their shoes. If I were to tell you all of the effects that would occur if you didn't eat for a week, would you be able to truly understand the desperation of a beggar asking you for food? Now, what if you had been forcibly starved for a week? What do you think might change? Quite a bit. Then apply that same mental exercise to my current occupation. Adventurers both receive and see many of the problems plaguing the world. From seeing these problems with my own eyes, I've gained a large amount of insight into the issues plaguing this kingdom and its people. For instance, the farmers are having issues harvesting crops because most of their help is being conscripted for war. While that might not seem like much, less farmers farming means less food is being produced. Less food can cause the price of available food to skyrocket, increasing growth of crime, leading to more destabilization that can compound on itself until the system breaks or something is done to fix the issue. I summarized while crossing my arms and thinking about the problem itself. Since this world's society seemed to be based around the medieval ages, it would go without saying that farmers here probably haven't figured out modern agricultural methods that aided in more consistent crop production. Perhaps I should go ask a farmer or two when I get back to Rantle on their farming method. And you've come to that full conclusion with just meeting a farmer? Theo asked, a little unconvinced. I would guess that investing so much time in studying only magic would make him less knowledgeable on basic economics. Yes. I've quite a bit of experience in seeing similar events play out many times. And the funny thing about history is that it likes to repeat itself. As I said this, I could help but recall the food crisis that happened in just my city a few years ago. The Corps had felt that population in the city was getting too large to sustain. Rather than just line up a bunch of poor and homeless citizens and put a bullet into their heads, causing complete anarchy to break out, they decided to go subtle. Fucking genius, really. Raise the price of food and water by a high enough amount to create an artificial scarcity. Then, watch as poorer citizens either starve or kill each other for basic necessities of survival. This, in turn, freed up housing space that could immediately be rented for a higher price, massively increased profits for the Corps from selling food at a marked-up price, and got rid of a lot of undesirables. I was lucky to get through that without that many issues. Some friends of mine weren't. I'll have to think on what you've told me. While there are possible methods to mitigate these issues that you're predicting, there are multiple potential hiccups that would prevent, say, the Magician's Guild from trying to enact such solutions, Theo said with an analytical gleam in his eyes. And what would these potential hiccups be? I asked with interest. For many years, making meaningful change in this kingdom has been extremely difficult. Many nobles become upset if positive changes might make them appear incompetent as rulers or could cut in on their bottom line. Those few people that try to make said changes end up disappearing if they aren't powerful enough, Theo stated with a far-off look. It seems that the more I hear about this kingdom's nobility, the greater their feats of incompetence manage to grow, I stated with annoyance. Welcome to the wonderful world of politics. Unless you have a position of power, then you're relegated to watching the kingdom burn from afar. Theo mocked with a tired grin. That doesn't mean that change is impossible. If one were to have a high enough rank within the Magician's Guild, you'd have close interactions with Re-Estize's nobility. And there's the baited offer that I had been waiting for. Wouldn't the same be said about attaining a high enough rank in the Adventurers Guild? In some ways, yes. But that only occurs when an adventurer has attained a rank above Platinum, and even then, said meetings are quite rare and typically initiated by the nobles instead of the adventurers. In comparison, since the Magician's Guild is a part of the Re-Estize, it gives high-ranking members the ability to easily initiate contact with nobility as we are considered a governmental body. But from the sounds of it, I'd also be considered a military asset if I was part of the guild. I summarize, much to the surprise and acknowledgement of Theo. You are correct that the Magician's Guild falls under a military classification. The only offset that I can give is that we are rarely, if ever, used within that capacity. I gave Theo an appreciative smile at the honesty. Crossing my leg and sitting up straight to give myself a regal bearing, I said, unfortunately, I cannot willingly tie myself down to such an offer. I'm not willing to become a weapon of mass destruction for the many corrupt rulers of this country. That said, while I won't join you, that doesn't mean that I can't work with you as an allied entity. Theo gave off a relieved sigh before smiling. To be quite honest, Kasha, I doubted that I'd be able to recruit you to my guild. From what I've learned about you, you're both extremely powerful and quite independent. I'd consider it a miracle if you joined my guild, but I consider it a victory that you'd be willing to collaborate with my guild for potential future endeavors. It appears that Theo's well informed. It made me wonder if he had or was going to have a few of his people keeping tabs on me. Probably very likely. Then I'm happy to have formed this alliance with you, Theo, I stated with a large grin. The copy. After the boss had informed me of the situation through message, I decided to start keeping an eye on what was going on by utilizing a scrying spell. This would let me act preemptively without needing the boss to fill me in on the details. It was also the reason that I was currently walking through the village of the Green Claw tribe. After hearing about how the Magician's Guild was coming to the stone tree that had been made a few days prior, and that they'd be investigating around the area, I wanted to let the tribe know and also prep them so that they wouldn't end up blowing the boss's cover. Aside from that, I needed to create some contingencies considering that Momonga and an unknown number of villains NPCs had been brought to this world. That was a massive clusterfuck just waiting to happen, all things considered. First step was to follow the boss's orders and cast some extra defenses on the village and her room at the inn. Following that, I needed to learn where it was that Momonga's guild landed in the new world. While I suspect that it's in the same country as where the boss landed, it could turn out that they instead landed in another country and are just scouting the surrounding areas. Either way, I couldn't take any chances, even if Momonga was from the boss's original home. There were too many unknown variables with the guy, especially since, for all she knew about the guy, he could just be a completely power-hungry asshole who was only acting nice until he could betray the boss at the most opportune moment. But one of my immediate concerns was how to deal with the Great Lake situation. I did have an idea on that, I only hoped that the boss wouldn't be too upset about it. Who am I kidding? She'd be both pissed and laughing. And all of this had led to where I was now, sitting in the hut of Shaziryu. While it is nice to see you once again, Kasha, I didn't expect you to arrive at my village for another few days. Is there any reason for this? Shaziryu asked. As a matter of fact, there is. I just discovered that your territory might be getting some unexpected visitors within the coming days. The moment I said this, the lizard man's body became tense. What kind of visitors do you speak of? He asked with a calm tone, even if his body said that he was anything but. It seems that my parlor trick with the stone tree did not go unnoticed, and some mages from the Magician's Guild of the Re-Estize Kingdom have taken interest in it. Interest enough to send an expedition to see it, I said calmly. The problem with humans and their interests is that they tend to get rid of anything in the way of their interests. What exactly does that mean for my village? Some might call Shaziryu a pessimist with this kind of attitude, but in a world like this, that was realism speaking. Back in the boss's world, her own home country's birth was founded on those with interests in the land pushing out those who already lived there. Now, what would a mage group devoted to studying, acquiring, and weaponizing everything magic do with a local populace that they deemed to be interfering with their work? Especially a local populace that said mage group would view more as savages than as a civilized society? What it means, Shaziryu, is that they will not step one foot into this village. Before the end of the day, if it's agreeable with you, I'll have put up some protective walls all around your village. Additionally, I'll have a few friends that will keep watch over the surroundings just in case. There's only one thing that I'll need from you to make sure that everything goes smoothly. What might that be? Shaziryu asked with interest. I'll need you to keep your people within the village when these mages arrive. My reasoning for this is twofold. Firstly, it'll make conflict between your people and them less likely, and secondly, is that I'm currently traveling with this expedition under a human guise. They don't suspect that I'm anything other than human, but having your people recognize me, even if unknowingly, could throw my whole plan in jeopardy. Wait, you're traveling with them? Shaziryu asked in shock. How did that even happen, and how are you speaking with me when they'd likely notice your disappearance? To answer your questions, I've been disguised as a human for the past couple of days in an effort to establish myself and learn more about the area. Due to this, I may have possibly gone overboard as an adventurer and revealed a bit too much of my power. Because of that, the Magicians Guild requested me for the job of escorting them to the tree. And finally, the reason I can speak to you now is due to using a magical duplicate to do so. Currently, the real Kasha is still traveling with the mages while I'm here with you. The Lizardman chief closed his eyes and rubbed his brow before sighing. Does everything about you always have to be either headache-inducing or world-shattering, Kasha? He slowly opened his eyes and met my gaze. I can keep my people within the village and away from the tree for a couple of days. But we will need things like food and supplies in return for this, since our hunters and gatherers will be stuck here. That's easy enough and quite agreeable, Shaziryu. Leave everything to me and it'll be like nothing is happening. Standing in the forest outside of the village, I decided that it was time to perform an experiment for the boss, since we hadn't tried a mook maker spell before. Certainly, Replicant created a being with intelligence and independence, but that could be waved off due to me being a copy of her, while Loki's call had proven that the boss would be summoning the actual gods that it described. But how would a regular NPCs summoned by the boss's only mook maker spell act? Well, I guess it was time to find out. From the memories I shared of the boss's prior experience in Yggdrasil, she had gotten the spell, Kitsune Servants, as a reward for reaching level 30 as a kitsune. The concept behind it being that the user could summon kitsune fox allies that were 2 tails or more under the summoner. While the spell seemed powerful on paper, since there wasn't a limit to the amount of fox allies one could summon along with these allies having high-leveled kitsune abilities based off your level, that was it. They cost a lot of mana once you hit past a 2-tailed ally, a time limit of 20 minutes, and a skill set that the dogshit AI would utilize terribly, which would get the summon killed. It was a noob trap that the boss only kept around, since it was free bodies that one could summon to take the hit of spells or abilities that couldn't be stopped unless they hit a body, and their mana cost was much cheaper than casting Replicant. Right now though, I had a feeling that this spell would have a bit of a different effect in this new world with the way that similar spells and skills had performed, my fabulous self being one such example. Holding out my hand, I cast Kitsune Servants, and watch a golden runic circle of magic appear on the ground before me as a silver fox with 2 tails pulled itself from the circle and gave itself a shake as it stood to reach my hips before looking at me. I answered to the summons of the 9-tailed princess, daughter to the divine. Go wait, you aren't the princess. You're just a copy. Seriously? I was hoping to be the first of Lady Inori's retinue to greet her progeny, and instead, I get summoned by the equivalent of a secretary. The silver fox said with intense disappointment while holding its snout with its paw. I did my best to contain myself at hearing myself be referred to as a secretary. Well, that was certainly a bit rude of you to say that, wouldn't you agree? I said with my arms crossed. The silver fox took a breath before slicking its ears back with a paw and looking at me. Okay, I'm good. The fox said in reassurance, though I wasn't sure if it was to me or itself. Sorry about the attitude. I just wasn't expecting this and got disappointed. My name is Ken, Grand Attendant of Her Lady Inori. Grand Attendant? Any explanation on that? I asked. As Her Lady's Grand Attendant, I ensure that Lady Inori is informed of current events, give announcements of Her Lady's decisions, and instruct the royal family in the duties of their station. Ken answered, which caused me to raise an eyebrow. So, to summarize, you are basically Inori's secretary. The moment I said this, Ken's whiskers began to twitch while his eyelids glared at me. If you were to put it in that way, I suppose so. Ken closed his eyes and took another breath before opening them and looking at me. Now, would you be so kind as to inform me of why I was summoned, and not by the princess herself? To summarize, a great secretary, Kasha is currently disguised as a human and traveling in the company of mages who was to investigate the giant stone tree she conjured a few days ago, I said while pointing to said tree behind me. At the same time, the lizard village over there knows of her true nature and I need them to stay there so as to not blow Kasha's cover. So, we've made a deal where I protect and feed them for the next few days in exchange for them staying within their village. That brings me to you, along with the question of how long you are able to stay within this realm. I finished summarizing. Ken nodded his head in understanding before answering, as long as the Princess Kasha requires our aid, we will remain in this realm until asked otherwise. I smirked at this as I held out my hand to do some more summoning. Then let's get cracking. Kasha. It was nightfall when we stopped at the edge of the great forest of Tob. From the chattering I was hearing from both the adventurers and mages, they were quite worried about encountering any one of the three monsters of the forest. While it was said that they could be bargained with for safe passage, they were equally as likely to just kill you for the hell of it. At least, two of them might be. I had already killed Gu a few days prior with ease, and the route we were traveling was through the territory of said former monster, which really meant that it was going through my territory. Wonder how much the people here would panic if they ever learned that little fact. Still, all of this led to why I was currently patrolling the edge of the camp to the forest. While my patrolling may have been under the orders of Theo, it also gave me the chance to get a layout of the defenses of the camp. This would be especially useful when trying to slip away and trade places with my copy. Currently, I was able to witness as the mages cast first-tier proximity wards that any decent mage or anti-mage character could get past. If one could cast any type of weak, blink, spell, then they could easily get around the ward, and any caster could pick up a blink spell the moment they could cast second-tier spells. It was for that reason that a player would typically have more than one type of ward spell that could cover other avenues of access. And yet, all these mages using the exact same type of basic ward told me that they either only were trained to know that single ward or their knowledge of wards was quite limited. It could be that any greater wards the Magicians Guild knew were too difficult for their weaker members to learn. Either way, it just meant that I had less work to do when performing the switch. And, judging from what I could guess on the time based on the position of the moon in the sky, it was getting real close to midnight. Giving a glance around the area along with a sniff of the air, I didn't notice anyone around me as I stepped into the woods and sent out a message to my copy. Ready to tag in for me? I asked. Definitely, boss. Took care of everything that needed to be done on my end. She answered before adding, we'll also need to have a chat about a few things when you've got the time after your chat with the Bone Boy. I couldn't help but raise a brow at the nickname that my copy gave Momonga. Bone Boy, really? What? I could have gone with the other names I came up with. Calcium Caster, Skinless Head, Mr. Every Bone but the one that matters, Necro. I decided to interrupt her tangent while trying to hold in my laughter. Okay, I get it. I'll talk with you after I meet with Momonga. I'm summoning you now. As I said this, I cast Replicant and watched my copy arrive before me. See ya in a while, boss. Also, don't forget to go under a disguise, else people will start asking questions. My copy recommended, which I nodded in appreciation to. Then, I cast disguise on myself and changed my appearance to a more mundane one with black hair, blue eyes, and a cloaked appearance in traveling leathers. Be seeing you, I stated before using my teleportation spell to arrive at an alley near the hero's respite. Looking around, I found the exit of the alley and strode out while sniffing the air. Ignoring all the wretched scents of the city, I picked up the stench of death that was approaching my position. Turning around, I spotted the black armored figure of Momonga and the cloaked figure of Narbril, both now wearing a bronze place of the Adventurers Guild. Calmly walking up to the pair, I gave them a slight wave. As I did this, Narbril tried to step in front of Momonga in an effort to protect him. I found it to be a little funny since Narbril was almost a foot and half shorter than the heavily armored man. Easy there, Narbril. It's just me. Narbril froze for a moment before looking at Momonga for instruction. I out a finger to my lips as Momonga tried to say my name. Just call me Kate for now. I quickly answered. Of course. Just remember what I said earlier, while here, I'm going by the name Momon and she, Momonga put his hand on Narbril's shoulder, much to her could I call it shock or was that pleasure, goes by Nobbe. Of course. Though, I feel like you could have come up with some more creative names. I mean, you're literally only missing one syllable, Momon. I remarked. Yes, well, I believe it is best for us to begin our discussion inside. Momonga answered before walking to the door of the hero's respite and opening it. Narbril and I walked inside while Momonga followed after us. Before we entered, multiple loud conversations had been echoing throughout the dining hall of the inn, yet the moment that we stepped in, the conversations became hushed and multiple discussions were made about us in quiet tones. The three of us ignored it and went to the bar where Morgan was busy filling up a tankard which he passed to a patron. Greetings, sir. Momonga greeted, grabbing Morgan's attention. My companions and I would like to rent out a room for the night. How much would it be? 5 copper a night. Food is served 3 times a day here, costs 1 copper for a dish. I've got 3 rules here: don't destroy my rooms, pay my bills, and don't fuck with me. Have a pleasant evening. Morgan answered. Momonga reached into a pouch on his belt and fished out some copper coins that he handed to Morgan. Morgan took the money and then gave Momonga a key. Your room is 7. Follow up the stairs and your room should be on the left. Hearing this, Momonga gave a nod and walked off to the room while Narbril and I followed. It was when all 3 of us entered the room and locked the door behind us did I finally let my disguise drop to reveal my kitsune form. Giving a large stretch, I used one of my tails to grab a chair and pull it up to the table in the room before sitting down. So, you ready to talk? I asked. Momonga and Narbril joined me at the table with chars of their own. To start with, how long ago was it that you arrived in the new world? For myself, it's been 9 days. I asked. 9 days for the NPCs of my guild and I. When we arrived, the timer for when Yggdrasil shut down had hit 0. I was in my throne room when it happened. Momonga answered. I was just finishing up a boss fight when I exited the boss zone and found myself walking on the road to Rantel. Guess that means that there wasn't anything specific to what we were doing besides just waiting out the timer. I remarked to myself. And yet, somehow, when I was brought here, whatever magic did so had managed to also bring my entire guild's base with me when it did so. As Momonga confirmed my worries on if his guild base had followed him or not, I couldn't help but think on how weirdly metaphysical our transport to this new world was. Now I can't help but wonder if a plot of land that I theoretically owned and stood on would have been transported with me or not. I asked aloud. I couldn't answer that, Kasha. But what I do wonder is if anyone else arrived along with us to the new world? We couldn't have been the only ones waiting until the last second for Yggdrasil to end. I have been hoping that one of my guildmates could have been brought here as well, but that would also mean that they ended up in a random location like the two of us were. I guess we can table the idea of other players having been brought with us for later. That's a lot of guesswork that won't get anywhere without a lot of effort, and that's if these players want to be found. Momonga gave a hum of thought before he nodded. You do have a point, but I still plan to send out some scouts to continue looking just in case. All the freedom to you. I'm not trying to stop you, I just want to caution you on wasting more effort for what could be a wild goose chase. What I'm more interested in is the state of this new world. What do you know of the surrounding country's politics? Not much besides the fact that the slain theocracy to the south of this kingdom tried to capture Kani village a few days ago. When Momonga said this, my eyes slightly widened in worry since that's where my team was going for their mission. They failed due to my interference, but it just means that they've become bold enough to start land annexation without fear of the Re-Estize's military. I felt myself calm down at hearing that Momonga repelled the invaders. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. To the east, the Baharuth Empire wages a continual, grinding war that results in massive amounts of casualties of innocent people on the battlefield, while off the field, many more people will die of starvation due to many of the farmers being drafted into a slaughter. While a waste, why does that matter to us? Momonga asked with a little confusion. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at the uncaring attitude being displayed, at least until I remembered how the former human, now lich, told me earlier that he was losing touch with his emotions. Guess lacking the emotions for empathy were really hitting this guy hard. Perhaps trying to relate the situation more clearly to Momonga might explain my thoughts better. Momonga, before we were summoned to this new world, what were your opinions about Earth? He was quiet for a moment in thought before finally voicing his thoughts. Earth was broken. Uncaring corporations tore apart the Earth, enough so to make it almost uninhabitable for the sake of increasing profits. The average person unlucky enough to be born into a poor family would either die young or live as another drone without hope of improving their lot in life. Humanity was just one step from ending, either from wars between the archaeology cities or between another country. Exactly. We were born into a world ruined by the greedy bastards at the top. Before coming here, we didn't have any power or ability to change things, but now? We are a pair of mages that know super-tier spells in a world where casting third-tier spells is considered the one of the strongest levels of magic that is reachable. We have the power to make things better for people here, enough so that this world doesn't turn into the shithole that we left. Altruism may not seem that exciting, but we are probably some of the only people that know what it's like to struggle to survive, but have the power to change that for others. What do you think? Momonga removed his helmet and revealed his undead visage of a white skull with a pair of glowing red dots that counted for eyes within those empty sockets. I'd have to think about it, Kasha, but I am hesitant about the idea. He then turned his glowing dots to Narbril before ordering in a commanding tone, Narbril, whatever has been said today is to never leave this room under pain of death. Do you understand? Said NPC's expression changed into one with something that was almost a mixture of seriousness combined with utter fanaticism before she answered, As you wish, Lord Momonga. Nothing of what is said here will ever leave this servant's lips unless at your request, my lord. I couldn't tell what Momonga was thinking, what with the lack of a face and all, but it seemed that he was satisfied with the response as he then commanded, Wait outside this room until I call you back in, and do not get involved in any conflicts. Narbril stood from her seat, bowed to Momonga, and then left the room. He then turned his focus back on me. As you have mentioned during our first discussion, none of the NPCs under my command are what you'd call morally good. But despite their personalities, all of them were the creations of my dear friends and guildmates, which makes me cherish them beyond measure. Unfortunately, it makes me paranoid that if I were to slip up and be found lacking in their expectations, then they will kill me. When Momonga said this, it made me understand his situation. While the guy was the guild leader of Ain's Ul Gaun, that didn't exactly mean that all the NPCs which were not made by him, and programmed to be loyal to the guild itself, would listen to someone they saw as weak and not working towards the greater good of the guild, whatever their idea on what a greater good could possibly entail. Then why not try to find out the loyalty of your NPCs for yourself? There's no doubt that you've got at least one good spell in your arsenal that could compulsively force any of your NPCs to tell you the truth. And that's if you're truly worried. Honestly, it shouldn't be that difficult of a task to perform. You could even frame it as confirming the loyalty of your subordinates or something similar. I finished with added air quotes of my fingers and tails. Perhaps. I'll think about it, he said with some thought, and what I felt might be hesitation. Momo, there's a fine line between being properly paranoid and being too paranoid to act. Just some advice for the future between you and I said with a smile. I'll take that under advisement. The lack of any real emotion in Momonga's tone along with the lack of any facial expression was really throwing off my ability to tell what he was thinking. Onto a different subject, what are your plans currently for this new world? I'll give you my answer if you give me yours. I replied. Momonga was silent for a moment, as if contemplating what to tell me, then he answered, I wish to hopefully find at least one of my comrades if they manage to have been brought to the new world. From there, possibly finding a way back home. What about you, Kasha? I've mostly been making up things as I go. But I've started looking into ways to make the world better than the one we've left. It's just this growing urge I have to change this place for the better. Alongside that, I haven't exactly had much thought on returning back to Earth. Currently though, I've joined an adventuring team called the Swords of Darkness and taken on an adorable apprentice. I see. So, you found a method to teach the spells of Yggdrasil to an inhabitant of this world, while lacking the actual knowledge of how our spells work? Momonga asked with interest. Not really. I lied. Sure, Momo could be a possible ally to me, but there were certain things I wanted to keep close to the chest since knowledge is still power, and the fact that I had supernaturally gained knowledge of how spellcasting worked was too much of an advantage to just give away. What I actually do is buff my apprentice with mana transference spells and have her continually cast spells beyond her normal limits until she collapses. Along with that, I tend to teach her spellcasting theory on min-maxing her spell effects and mana usage. It's been doing wonders for her since I've managed to level her up a few times from the training. I couldn't help but smile with pride at how fast Nina was growing in power. There's no doubt that if she had been left alone to grow stronger at her own pace, she'd probably be a renowned mage well into her adulthood. But, with my power leveling method, she'd probably be one of the strongest mages in the world by her early 20s. Interesting. Are you having this apprentice of yours earn XP from fighting monsters, or does she just gain levels purely from the act of casting her spells? Momonga with a contradictory monotone excitement. It's been purely through practice. From what I can reason, inhabitants of this world can gain XP passively through utilizing their skills or actively through killing other beings. Though it appears that interacting around players like you and I gives a passive boost to the XP that they gain since my other team members have been growing stronger at astonishing speeds from just being around me. It could also just be related to being around something that so outclasses their level that their bodies naturally try to speed up their normal leveling as a method of compensation or self-preservation. I'd need more data to prove that finding though. That is something to keep an eye on. Aside from this, have you discovered any other unique properties of the inhabitants of this world? There are some parts of the population that can be born with special skills which we'd consider as perks, called talents. Some can be less useful, like being able to predict the weather with a chance to be wrong, while others, like my students, speeds up the ability to learn spells. It's completely random, but it does make me wonder if children of those who have talents have a higher chance of being born with a talent or not? I answered while resting my chin in my hand and thinking. Surely some nutcase has already considered an attempt at eugenics with producing a child with useful talents? The only question is if it actually worked or not. What I can glean from this is that while weaker than us, the inhabitants of this world are possibly more diverse in their skill sets in comparison. For instance, I couldn't even attempt to wield a sword until I used Perfect Warrior to do so, which means that both of us are locked to the rules of Yggdrasil on class restrictions. The same cannot be said of the people here who don't have to follow the same rules that we must. Momo theorized. While a serious discussion, I couldn't help but giggle at the idea of a giant, scary lich tripping over himself like an old cartoon while trying to handle a simple dagger. Momo cocked his head in question before asking, "Kasha, why are you laughing right now?" I held the giggling back as much as I could to answer, because all I can imagine right now is a giant, scary skeleton trying to stab a person with a butter knife and continually missing. Then I burst into a new fit of giggles. That was when I got to hear the first bit of emotion from Momonga as he gave off a chuckle. He had a single moment of levity before what appeared to be an enchantment in the form of a teal glow took a hold of his body and the chuckling died down immediately. I guess that this would be the emotional suppression that Momonga had been talking about. To think that it would take the form of a curse, something that I could recognize from the mystical knowledge that I'd attained. It was a harsh thing to witness, but understandable from a lore standpoint of Yggdrasil. In the universal lore of Yggdrasil, becoming an undead was considered a horrific existence. Banished from passing on to any afterlife, yet trapped within a rotting form that the poor soul was unable to control. It was a terrible fate that none should ever be condemned to, and yet, there were those who thought otherwise. A lich was a person who would willingly give up their life, along with the lives of an untold number of innocents, to achieve power. It was no wonder that the gods would then curse the person who would spit upon the cycle of life and death like this. To never find pleasure in unlife that you didn't appreciate in life was just one such curse. One of the bosses, Ingvar the Scuttled, could be found in Midgard and was given the curse to never again traverse the seas that you loved. You'd have to find him trapped upon an island filled to the brim with his undead victims. It was a cruel punishment to give to Momonga, who had only been playing a character from a game. I highly doubt that the guy was the type of mass murderer that deserved to be punished by the gods. Proceeding on from what we were discussing, we should try to study these people to learn of any further differences. The adventuring group that you are a part of should help with this, since you'll likely be in close contact with them. My subordinates and I will continue our studies to find any further information. If you are sending your people out into the world, and I'm still very hesitant about that, mind you, can you try to get me any information on the Baharuth Empire? While I am learning what I can about the Riastais, there isn't much I can find out about the Baharuth, since this country isn't exactly giving out books or information about them that isn't either lies, rumors, or propaganda. I asked while leaning forwards and resting my elbows on the table. That is doable. I hope that you will be open to sharing some information with me in trade. I gave Momonga a nod in response. I think this meeting has served its purpose quite well. I'd be up to meet here again next week to resume our talk if you are. Definitely, Momo. This looks like the beginning of a beautiful partnership. I stood up from my chair and held my hand out to the lich. A partnership would be a good step forwards, Fox 13 I mean, Kasha. I couldn't help but smirk at the slip-up from Momonga. Then, he stood up as well and shook my hand. Then, I leaned forwards and added, "And if you need someone to talk to, I have an ear open to listen. They are quite large. I'll keep that in mind." He then let go of my hand before hesitantly adding, "Thank you." "You're welcome, Momo. See you later." With that said, I reapplied my illusion and decided to cast teleport and head to my cabin at Haven Lake. Unknown. I couldn't stop the trembling of my hands as I felt inconceivable rage fill my heart. Who in the name of my love did this bitch think she was? Who was she to even touch my love? How dare she even act like she was on the same level as him? My hands smashed down on the table holding the scrying orb, causing the table to break into splinters and the orb to roll away on the carpet. That was when the door behind me opened and in walked my second-in-command, Demiurge. "Is everything all right, Albedo? You seem quite upset," he asked in that prying tone of his while adjusting his glasses. I took a moment to try and calm down enough to even answer Demiurge's question. Then, I finally spoke. "What information do you have on the Kitsune horn known as Fox 13H? The moment I asked this, Demiurge gained a look of uncharacteristic surprise which quickly turned into that of concern. Quite a bit. After all, she is the one that once defeated my creator.